Hi everybody, so today we are going to be talking about standard form. So standard form is another way that we can write a linear equation, and when something is written in standard form, it's written in this format: ax plus by equals c. So when we're writing these equations, we want to make sure that we have x and y on the same side of the equal sign. All right, so our first activity, we are going to need to convert standard form into slope-intercept form. So we are going to need to move our equation into ax plus by equals c, and we are going to need to convert that to look like y equals mx plus b, and that's slope-intercept form. So what we need to do is we need to get y by itself. So our first thing here for number 1 is we have 2x that's on the same side of y. To get rid of a positive 2x, we are going to subtract 2x from both sides. And we'll be left with positive y equals, now negative 2x and 3 are not like terms, so we're going to leave it as negative 2x plus 3. Number 2, so x and y are on the same side of the equal sign, so that is in standard form, and we need to get y by itself. So we want to keep the y here, and we want to move everything else on that same side with it. So 5 is attached to y. That's the last thing we want to move. So first we're going to want to move this positive 4x. So to get rid of a positive 4x, we're going to subtract 4x to both sides. I am left with 5y equals negative 4x minus 30. Now I still have y on the left side, but it's not by itself. So I need to get rid of that 5 in front of it. That 5 is multiplying to the y, so the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 5. And I'm left with y equals, and then we'll go to our graphing calculator, negative 4 divided by 5, math, enter, enter. And we get negative 4/5, and then we'll do negative 30 divided by 5, and we would get minus 6. All right, so we had negative 4/5 x minus 6, and this is our slope-intercept form. All right, so if you notice the pattern, we had to move the x first, and then we have to divide by the number that's in front of y. So looking at number 3, we need to get rid of our x first. So we're going to get how to get rid of a positive x. We're going to subtract x from both sides. I'm left with negative 3y equals negative x plus 12. So our first thing we did is we need to move our x by doing the opposite, and then we need to divide by the number in front of y. So in this case, it's negative 3, so let's divide by negative 3. And I'm left with y equals, I go to my calculator, negative 1, because there's a 1 in front of that x. Negative 1 divided by negative 3 gets me positive 0.333. Math, enter, enter. I get 1/3 x. And 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4, or minus 4. All right, let's look at number 4. So first thing, we've got to get y by itself, And the pattern so far has been to get rid of the x, so subtract x from both sides. I'm left with negative y equals negative x minus 8. There's a negative 1 in front of this y, so I'm going to divide everything by negative 1. Use your graphing calculator. I'm left with y equals negative 1 divided by negative 1 gives me positive 1x, or just x, and negative 8 divided by negative 1 gives me plus 8. So you could write it as y equals 1x plus 8, or y equals 1x plus 8. These are the exact same thing, just one has a 1 in front of the x and one is just the x. All right, and you are going to do 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, and you need to do number 9. And let's do number 10. So our first step, remember, was that we need to move the x to the other side, because we need to get y by itself. So to get rid of a negative 2x, we need to add 2x to both sides. These are not like terms, so we're left with negative 4y equals positive 2x plus 36. And then our second step is to divide by the number in front of y. So that number here is negative 4, so we're going to divide everything by negative 4. And I'm left with y equals 2 divided by negative 4 gives me negative 1/2. So 2 divided by negative 4, math, enter, enter, x. And then 36 divided by negative 4 is negative 9. So if you go right now and you're listening to this, go ahead and draw a star right here by this question, and you will receive extra credit on this assignment. And then do number 11 and number 12. All right, so our next thing about standard form is we are going to have to look at a graph and determine which equation best represents the line that is shown. So let's first identify a few things about this graph that we have already learned in a previous lesson. So this location here is the spot where the graph crosses the y-intercept. We call that the y-intercept. Does anyone know what letter is represented in that in slope-intercept form? That would be our B. So remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So the b is the y-intercept. In this case, we go down 2, so our b is negative 2. And then the next, what we need to graph is we need to figure out where 2 points are so we can find the slope. So if I'm going to start here at negative 2, the next point is here, and that's right where the line crosses through the grid. So we're going to go up 1 and over 1, 2, 3. So if we go up 1 and right 3, our slope is y equals 1/3 x minus 2. All right, so I've snipped the choices A, B, C, and D, and in order to figure out which one of these equations represents our graph, which we figured out was in y equals 1/3 x minus 2, we're going to have to look at all these equations here, and we are going to need to get them into slope-intercept form, which means we are going to need to get them y by itself. So let's start with A. A, we have x plus 3y equals -6. In order to get y by itself, we need to subtract x from both sides, and we would get 3y equals -x minus 6. We would then divide by 3, and we would get y equals -1/3 x minus 2. So this is A, and A, we're looking for y equals positive 1/3 x minus 2, and that is not the same, so A is not a choice. So let's look at B. All right, so B is x minus 3y equals 6. We need to get y by itself, so we're going to subtract x from both sides. We'll be left with -3y equals -x plus 6. We then will divide by -3, and we would be left with y equals 1/3 x, and then 6 divided by -3 is -2. And does that match our choice, y equals 1/3 x minus 2? Yes, it does. So B, as of right now, works. All right, let's just double check to make sure C and D are not right and don't match. So C is 3x plus y equals -2. I would first start with subtracting 3x from both sides. I'd be left with y equals -3x minus 2. That is definitely not a choice, because we want y equals 1/3 x. Next is D, and D is 3x minus y equals 2. So I would subtract 3x from both sides. I'm left with -y equals -3x plus 2. I then need to divide everything by -1 because there's a -1 in front of this y. And I'd be left with y equals -3 divided by -1 is positive 3x, and 2 divided by -1 is -2. And that does not match because we want y equals 1/3 x minus 2. So as of right now, our best choice is B. All right, let's look at number 14, and I want you to identify two pieces of information in this graph. I want you to tell me what the y-intercept is. And then I also want you to tell me what the slope is. So the y-intercept is the point on the line where the graph crosses the y-axis, and that is right here, and that location is -1. And then my slope, I need to find 2 points on the graph, and we've just identified one. And then I'm going to look to see where the next one is, and it looks about right there. So it falls right on that grid. So I need to count for slope, how many do I go up and then how many do I go over? So if I'm going up, that is going to be a positive number. And then how many I'm going to run. Now, running could be two things. If I'm going to run to the right, that means my number needs to be positive. If I'm going to run to the left, that means my number needs to be negative. So in this sense, if I'm going to go up 1, 2, so I run up 2, and I'm going to go right 1, my slope is 2 over 1. So if I'm going to go into y equals mx plus b form, let's fill this in. It's going to be y equals, my m is 2 over 1, or just 2x, and my b is minus 1. So now you're going to need to go to all 4 equations, a, b, c, or d, and you are going to need to get them as y by itself. All right, so go ahead and do a and get y by itself. All right. Okay, so you're going to subtract x from both sides. You'll be left with 2y equals negative x minus 2. Divide by 2. I'm left with y equals negative 1 over 2x minus 1. All right, and go ahead and get b by itself. All right, so you would subtract x from both sides. You'd be left with 2y equals negative x plus 2. Divide by negative 2. You'll be left with y equals negative 1 divided by negative 2 is 1 over 2x. And then 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. And this is not our match because we wanted 2x, not 1/2 x. So B is not your choice. Go ahead and do C, get y by itself. All right, so you'll subtract 2x from both sides. You're left with y equals negative 2x minus 1. And the reason why this does not work is because we want our 2 to be positive, not negative. So go ahead and get d by itself. Look at d and get y by itself. So you would subtract 2x from both sides. You'd be left with negative y equals negative 2x plus 1. You would then divide everything by negative 1 because there's a negative in front of that y. And you'd be left with y equals 2x, and 1 divided by negative 1 is negative 1. And that is the exact same match that we wanted in a standard form. All right, go ahead and do number 15. And remember, you're going to need to identify first what your y-intercept is. And then also your slope. And figure out which equation in standard form matches this graph.